Firstly, remove the motor connector. Then, carefully remove the firebox flicker connector and carefully remove the PCB and cable holding the firebox flicker LEDs. Now, remove the 2 screws from the plate in front of the motor and lift off the plate. Now we need to tidy up the unnecessary wiring. The wires are plugged into the plunger pickups, which need to be retained as they assist in maintaining the wheel set centrally in the frames while permitting side play, slop. Carefully pull the wires from the plunger spindle of the leading driving wheels. Next, we need to invert the chassis to be able to access the hidden plunger connections on the rear driving wheels and trailing wheels. There are many delicate fittings that need to be protected. We keep a piece of foam to act as a cradle to hold the locomotive securely but softly. Firstly, carefully release the brake rodding moulding from the brake hangers. It's very easy to damage this component. I was lucky that I was able to free the clevis pin just behind the trailing wheels. Otherwise I would gently bend the brake operating rod to access the plate beneath. Next, remove the cables from the plungers on the rear driving wheels. Very carefully pull the plug at the end of each wire out of the plunger. Hold the heat shrink plastic coat to do this. To access the plungers for the trailing wheels, you have to remove the cover plate. Beware that you don't lose that spring. When you replace the plate, you have to align the spring carefully around the spindle and into the chassis pocket. Essential, when you have replaced the plate, ensure that the spring is properly seated by compressing the rearmost driving axle. Replace the brake operating rod into the holes in the brake hangers and glue the clevis joint back if you removed it. Now gently pull the pickup wires through the holes in the chassis. Do this one wire at a time. You now have just the 2 wires to the motor. Peel back the heat shrink around the motor terminals. Carefully unsolder the wires from both terminals. Beware, do not melt the plastic around the terminals. We now need to fit the 9953 motor cable included with the 0502 locomotive control unit. Trim one lead to 130 mm, the other to 140 mm. Cut one piece of the heat shrink tube included with the 0502 LCU to make 2 pieces, each 10 mm long, and thread one piece on each wire. Strip back 3 mm of the insulation around each cable and solder to each motor terminal. The longer lead attaches to the forward-facing terminal. A slot needs to be cut under the backhead of the cab to allow the motor cables to pass from the motor into the cab. The 9601 plug charging unit needs to be fitted securely in the bunker. For this we designed a harness. You can download a drawing from protocab.com to construct it from 40 thou 1mm plastic card. The secure fixing is created by screwing the 9601 to part A of the harness. This shows the prototype assembly. The 9601 has been attached with 8BA nuts and bolts, which have been filed flush with the nuts. Part D replaces the 2 brown Acc+Ess spruce extracts to provide a resistance to the force of inserting the charging plug. Note: a slot should be filed in the left side to pass the 9949 cable to the 0502 from behind the 9601. Part A is secured to the locomotive chassis through a brass angle fitted with an 8BA nut. Cut a piece of brass bar, drilled number 44, at approximately 5.5mm centres. Bend the bar in a vise with the edge of one hole near the bend. Return to the vise, clean and flux the end, and solder the 8BA nut. The cocktail stick has been inserted for alignment. This nut will secure the harness to the locomotive chassis. A second 8BA nut, which will secure the fitment to Part A, is soldered in place. It is essential that the countersunk screws do not protrude the back of Part A, as this will risk them damaging the battery. Ignore the additional pair of holes shown. The brass angle is secured to Part A. However, the nut is too high on the angle to correspond with the aperture in the loco chassis, so using a soldering iron and gently pushing on top of the nut, melt the solder until the nut moves down to be flush with the back of Part A. Open the offside hole in the body of the loco at the base of the bunker rear with a number 44 drill. Double check that you are opening the correct hole. Make sure that the brass angle is flush with Part D using a file, or, if you have a steady hand, use a slitting disc. Use a finer file than shown to ensure that the brass angle and the nuts are flush with parts B and D. Now do a test assembly to check that the securing nut aligns with the opened hole in the loco body. The harness fits between the cab rear sheet and the Protocab battery. You may need to adjust the nut even more, but ensure that the components on the back of Part A remain flush. We now turn to the 0502 LCU assembly. We trim two pieces of heat conducting putty around the antenna and blitz light and the three sockets. Retain the transparent plastic delivered with the putty in the 0502 LCU package. Wrap the two pieces of putty pressed into the 0502 with a piece of tape 12mm wide. At this stage, adopt the 0502 to your 0201 direct controller. Without installing the components in the bunker, connect everything together, adopt the 0502 and test run the loco. Lift off the workbench first. Beware of pieces of the grey heat conducting putty in the connector and clean out very carefully. The pins of the socket are very delicate. Attach the plugs, ensuring that they are flush with the top of the socket, and carry out a gentle tug test. When the loco runs satisfactorily, you can now assemble the loco. I put a blob of hot glue on the 9953 cable to secure it to the coal heap to make it easier to align when assembling the loco. Ensure that the body is flush with the footplate. The two spigots under the smokebox saddle have to be aligned with the holes in the footplate. Now the body is flush. Test that the locomotive responds to the 0201 direct controller before finalizing installation. The 0502's loco switch will fit under the coal load supplied by Dapol, so will need to be trimmed. Cut 5mm from each side. Connect the 9953 motor lead to the motor socket on the 0502. Without straining any cable and taking great care that the wires do not come out of the connectors, connect the battery and the 9601 to the 0502. Place the battery behind the cab as shown, and ensuring that the battery cables are located completely underneath the 0502, slide the 0502 into place. It is essential that the battery cables are not visible where the 9601 harness will be installed. Do not push the 0502 down too far because the antenna rests above the curve of the bunker rear. Push the battery as far forward as it will go behind the cab rear wall and slide the 9601 harness between the battery and the bunker rear. Make sure that the top of the harness is just below the ridge on the moulding on the side of the bunker. An 8BA screw should be cut to size. It will hold the harness in place. When inserting the screw through the chassis, hold the harness in place. Essential: make sure that the screw is only finger tight. Test that the harness will not come away when removing the charging plug. The coal load supplied by Dapol needs to be drilled. The diagram, which can be downloaded from protocab.com, shows the dimensions and drill positions. Finish the size with a reamer. Paint the apertures black. Peel off the paper from the loco switch and affix it to the rear of the coal load. You will need to pierce the copper to let the blitz light shine through it and the coal load. Test fit the coal load in place. Ensure that the loco switch lead is not trapped. Test that the loco switch responds correctly. Insert the charging plug and ensure that you can see a deep cherry red light. If it appears orange, you need to check all connections to the 0502 and the 9601. And now the final testing before adding the fully working loco to your fleet. Direct mode. Simulate mode. Coasting. Control braking. Full regulator. Full brake application.